Hey, Margie here. Are you ready to learn about a molecule called spermidine that can improve our bones, overall health, our skin, hair, nails, sleep, and so much more? Well, if so, you are in the right place. And our special guest today is Leslie Kenny. Leslie is an autoimmune survivor and thriver. She's a certified health coach and founder and CEO of Oxford Healthspan. Oxford educates consumers on the latest scientifically based molecules that have been proven to slow aging. She is also the co founder of the nonprofit Oxford Longevity Project, which aims to bring the latest scientific breakthroughs on healthy aging to the general public. Leslie holds degrees from Berkeley and Harvard. And in today's talk, we delve into spermidine, what the mechanism of action is, and how it can help us, as well as how we can get it from our food as well as supplements. So, lots of great information. So, stay tuned. Welcome, Leslie. So happy to have you here. I'm really excited about this topic. This is something new to a lot of people, and I just find it fascinating. And I just think it has so much potential to really help people. So, welcome.
Thank you very much, Margie. I'm really pleased to be here.
I always like to start with the backstory, and yours is really interesting. And my philosophy is you dig deep and you don't settle. And that's so much what you did in your story. And also, there's always silver linings at the end, like from things that you've struggled with. So, all those things are part of your story. So, why don't you start with how you got to do what you did today and discover spermidine and all these wonderful things?
Absolutely. Well, in 2004, I was around 39 years old and desperately trying to get pregnant, as women who are at the end of their 30s might do, and began to notice some pain in my hands and my fingers. I couldn't use scissors or turn doorknobs or faucets. And I went to my doctor and I said, think I'm too young to have this, but I imagine that this is what arthritis feels like. And they ran various tests and got a call. Expected it to be from the nurse, but it was actually from the doctor saying, your results are back. Can you come in and we can have some time to discuss them, which I knew was a bad sign. Went in to see the doctor and she said, well, you were right. I suppose we patients like to know that we're right. You do have arthritis, it's rheumatoid arthritis, but you also have something called lupus. And your immune system is overreacting. It's a very strong immune system. And I said, isn't that good? Isn't that great? That means I'll fight cancer better. And she said, actually, not in this case, because what's happening is that your body, your immune system is in fact trying to destroy organs and tissues, and that's not good. And that's where the pain in your joints is coming from. So here are a bunch of immune suppressants to control your immune system that is run amok. And you just inject once a day into your belly. It's not a problem. It's a tiny diabetic needle. You'll get used to it very quickly. Already, many different things are flashing through my mind. What? I have to inject myself daily? I have to do this in my belly? And then she said, but also, there is no cure for lupus. At this point, I didn't even know what lupus was. I'd never heard of it. And I said, I don't understand. There's no cure for it. How can there be no cure? And I was one of those individuals who looked to my doctor for all the answers because they're the ones with the lovely certificates behind their desk and they get to wear the white coat and the stethoscope. So they must have all the right answers. But she said, we don't have a cure for it. I said, do you realize that I'm doing my fifth IVF treatment right now? I'm using donor eggs. This is really inconvenient. You've got to find a solution. And it was all about my convenience. And I'm just thinking, money will make this go away, right? And she said, I'm sorry, but there's nothing we can do. And she said, you're planning on having a baby? And I said, well, that's the hope. That's the hope. And she said, if I were you, I wouldn't do that. You have a good 5 years left. And I thought, the things that don't get me wrong, I love my doctors. We're all human. Sometimes we say things that are not necessarily, they don't come across to the patient in the right way. I'm sure she meant it as helpful, but it's pretty devastating to a woman whose only dream is to have a baby. And I said, "Oh, could be a false positive. Can we please test again?" And she gave me this sympathetic look that said, "I know it's not really possible for this to be a false positive, but it's your insurance. So, of course, you can test again." She did say that given how high my tumor necrosis factor um, alpha levels were and my cytokines, it was very unlikely for this to be a false positive, but we could do that. So in that moment, I decided I'm going to have to learn everything about this and throw the kitchen sink at it. Anything I can do to meet my doctor halfway is going to be better than doing nothing at all. I don't accept that I have 5 years. I don't accept that I should not become a mother. I don't accept that this can't be fixed. Surely something can be done. And in that moment, I really just was focused on getting the test to say that I was in the all clear. So I did research and I noticed that inflammation was at the root of all of these, of lupus and rheumatoid arthritis. And I looked for triggers for the inflammation, and gluten and dairy were among the main triggers. I did not test to see if I had issues with them. I just took them out of my diet entirely. I was doing sort of an elimination diet. I went on Dr. Barry Sears's diet, the Zone anti-inflammation diet, and put in lots of olive oil. I was making my own almond milk. I had tons of vegetables, oily fish, supplements, healthy supplements that could support my body, improve the nutritional status, and also work on the inflammation. And I, Margie, I did everything. I did Mayan uterine massage. I did meditation. I did guided, guided meditation. I did so many different things. I would have prayed to any god at that point. I would do anything to make this go away. I walked the Rocky Mountains every day. I was doing yoga. I tried to be the perfect patient and live in as much harmony as I could find. So fast forward a few months, I go back. And I did do something called intravenous immunoglobulin. This is an allopathic treatment. It's still not very well known. It's a transfusion. And what I liked about it was that in the research, it said it would bring the immune system back into homeostasis as opposed to suppressing it. And so I did 2 rounds of that. I went back to my doctor within 6 months of the original diagnosis. And she said, "Well, look at that. You don't have RA or lupus anymore." And that was when the penny dropped. And I thought, wait a second. But you told me a few months ago that I had this incurable disease. And now you're saying I don't have this anymore. And this also means I don't have to take those big boxes of, syringes. I don't have to inject myself anymore. And she said, "That's right." And I said, "Do you want to know what I did?" And she said, "No, that's okay. Just keep doing it." And when that happens, I think as a patient, of course, what you want to do is shout from the rooftops. You want to tell everyone, "Look what I did. This is amazing. The body is incredible." It's not like I did anything, I didn't jump off a cliff or something to fix this. I just used diet and meditation and yoga and I did intravenous immunoglobulin. So in my opinion, what I did was I reset the immune system and I removed all the triggers that were making it malfunction with the diet and the lifestyle changes. And from that moment on, I became a patient advocate, listening to other patients who were in situations where they felt they had no hope and thinking, well, why don't you just try to improve your diet and lifestyle, sleep, exercise? These are the levers that we patients can actually push on. Let's try working on those and see if the symptoms don't improve or not. And, uh, fast forward many years later, I'd moved to Oxford, England. I'm on the school playground with my daughters, and I'm talking to other parents who happen to be scientists at the University of Oxford. And I ask them what they're doing, and some of them are doing transcranial electrostimulation to beat depression. Others are working in immunology. Others are working on diabetes. And I'm thinking, these are amazing discoveries. Do you all have companies? And they all say, oh, no, 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 I'm not a business person. Would you like to have a company? No, 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 no. I just want to do my research. And I realized that there was this disconnect between this breakthrough science and getting it to, not just market, but to patients like me. Right. And so I began fundraising for some of these individuals, helping them put things together in companies. And the folks at the university understood, because I'm also a health coach through the Institute for Integrative Nutrition in New York City. They knew that I had this interest in holistic health, and told me about a wonderful scientist in the immunology department, Katja Simon, who was working on a completely natural food-derived molecule called spermidine, and how it was improving the immune system, the elderly immune system. And talking to her and looking at other research, I saw that spermidine was also very important to other aspects of human health. And it had a positive impact on brain health, on heart health, on lipid profiles and metabolism. It also had a positive impact on osteoarthritis, lupus, and bone health. So at that point, I decided that we ought to try and get this out there, just so that other people would be able to benefit from it. And that's really the story of how I got involved with this awkwardly named molecule, which does indeed have something to do with sperm. Everybody always asks, because the sperm has quite a lot of spermidine in it to protect it from the reactive oxygen species that is generated when sperm is made. So it's a very high reactive oxygen species process. And it is also very prevalent in breast milk. And it is in all plants, particularly in the seeds or the endosperms of seeds, because that is what is needed to basically help the next generation of plants or mammals grow. So
Wow.
that's the story.
So let's go into spermidine and actually what it does and how it works. What's the mechanism of action? Because I think there's a lot, well, a couple of things. There's, I just want to say something about your story on inflammation. And inflammation is a root cause of osteoporosis. And, it's just so common. What not so common, but it's way more common than we think that, people are told, I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do. And but not this community. We like to dig deep and figure out what can be done. So I really love the story and how you
Yeah.
ended up doing something really terrific with that. But okay,
Oh,
let's go
thank
back
you.
to spermidine and let's talk about the mechanism of action because there's so many areas that I think it can help our bones and overall health as well.
Yes, that's right. So spermidine actually activates a cellular renewal and recycling process called autophagy. And a Japanese scientist, Yoshinori Osumi, was awarded the Nobel Prize in Medicine or Physiology in 2016 for his discovery of the mechanism of action of autophagy. And the Japanese really lead the world in research on autophagy. Um, Without autophagy, and this is something, spermidine is naturally present in our bodies. So I just want to start out with the fact that when we are infants, that is when we have the absolute highest concentrations of spermidine in our bodies because spermidine helps us grow. And again, why breast milk is full of spermidine as well to help the baby's body grow. It also is good for healing and sealing up the cell lining of the gut because it will downregulate zonulin, which opens up the tight junctions of the gut. So we make it when we are young. We make a third of it in our tissues. We make a third in our gut biome, and then we get a third from our food. And these are primarily plants. So things like shiitake mushrooms and legumes. The Japanese have a dish called natto, which is fermented soybeans, especially high in spermidine. You can get it again from wheat germ, so that endosperm that I'm talking about. Rice bran, you can get it there as well. And anything fermented, so sauerkraut, and we know a lot of civilizations around the world have fermented food. Even aged cheeses will have it. So third from food, third from the gut biome, a third in our tissues. As we get older, just as hormone production, things like progesterone, estrogen, testosterone, glutathione, melatonin, they all begin to fall by the wayside. Spermidine falls by the wayside too. So we are then even more dependent on getting more spermidine from our food. And at all of these times, as long as we have spermidine in our bodies, we will naturally activate autophagy. And they say that as we get older and we begin to aging, some scientists say that aging is due to dysfunctional autophagy. And that if we can make autophagy functional again, we can slow down or possibly even reverse the aging process. And if you think about the fact that all of our tissues and organs, they think of them at the cellular level, right? These building blocks, everything is dependent on the health of those building blocks. So in the same way that we want to be avoiding smoking and alcohol and sugar and, your community, things like gluten, we want to be ensuring that the cell is in as perfect health as possible, making sure that there is enough spermidine to activate autophagy. And then all of these other things, tissues, bone, even hair, organs, they will all then be more vital and healthy and young. So that's one of the reasons why we want to continue to get spermidine in our diet as we get older. But it all has to do with the body's innate wisdom to renew and recycle the cells through autophagy.
Can you just explain autophagy for people listening who say, I don't totally get it? Just like,
Yeah,
really,
sure.
really, really simple,
Okay.
because a lot of people think they've heard about autophagy for
Yeah.
cancer and they've heard about
Okay.
things, but maybe make it real simple for anyone who's like,
Okay.
I don't totally get this.
Imagine your cell is like your house. And as you get older, you accumulate things that are no longer useful to you. They might have been useful to you 20 years ago. They're not useful to you. The junk doesn't get cleared out. Autophagy is like Marie Kondo coming in and she is bagging up all of this old junk. She's putting into these giant garbage bags and she is putting post-it notes and saying, Salvation Army, this goes straight to the dump. She has different bags. That's autophagy in your cell. It is Marie Kondo for your cells, right? Whatever doesn't spark joy in the cell, it goes so that your cells can spark joy again.
Perfect. Thank you. I just want everyone to totally get this so they understand why this can be so powerful and why it's something that could really help us. Okay, so continue. So autophagy is one of the main reasons. Is there any other ways that it's working on our bodies?
Well, it decreases inflammation. So that is another thing. But on its own, you may be familiar with the theory of the 9 or 10 hallmarks of aging. They vary in number, but these are pathways down which we age. And in cancer research, there were theories about the hallmarks of cancer progression. And so with aging, someone came up with these originally nine hallmarks of aging. And they're things that we've all heard about, like dysfunctional stem cells, dysfunctional mitochondria, shortened telomeres. Telomeres are, those end caps at the ends of our chromosomes that mean we can no longer replicate our cells properly. Um, Things like impaired protein folding. So proteins are really important inside the cell. I liken this to, again, Marie Kondo folding up everything beautifully in the drawers in your bedroom. Imagine opening a drawer. Nothing's been folded up. Everything is a big mess. And, you just can't function well. So impaired protein folding, stem cell dysfunction, mitochondrial dysfunction, telomere attrition. These are some of the things that spermidine can actually help with. And you also have impaired intercellular communication, epigenetic changes. It can help inhibit those changes as well. And another thing is that with senescent cells, we can't prove that spermidine inhibits cellular senescence. This is when you get those zombie cells. Um, so I don't know how much um, you know about senescent cells, but basically, once our cells replicate after a certain number of times, the body says, "Oh, wait a second, I'm a little worried you might become cancerous. I'm going to have you stop replicating, and I'm just going to have you do nothing. Just sit in the corner and do nothing." And unfortunately, those cells, which don't die off, they then begin to leak. Um, they leak things like mitochondria that are no longer functioning well. They leak other cellular contents like those misfolded proteins, and they affect healthy cells around them. So we don't want these senescent cells around, these zombie cells that infect communities of healthy cells. We know that with immune senescence, and this is the research done here at the University of Oxford, spermidine can rejuvenate elderly human cells, at least in a petri dish. We can see that it will reverse that senescence. And that's quite exciting. We haven't been able to prove it in the rest of the body yet, but it looks very promising.
So let's get to the bones because there is research on this. And how this can impact our bone health. So why don't you share some of the research that's been done?
Well, if we look specifically at something like osteoporosis, so we know, for instance, that osteoclast and osteoblast, I'm sure your community knows that osteoblast, the B for building bone, and the C, which is chewing it up, that you want to actually inhibit the activity of those osteoclast. And so we know, and I'll caveat this because these are mouse studies and we are not mice, but it's promising, that if you give spermidine and spermine, another polyamine, and they often occur together in nature, if you give these to mice who have been ovarectomized, so their ovaries have been removed and they are put into menopause, and this is when your osteoclast increase and they start to chew up bone. If you give them spermidine and spermine, they actually will inhibit that activity of osteoclast will be inhibited, which is that's very helpful because we don't want the osteoclast to be diminishing bone as we get older, right? So that's one of the studies. Much of this has been done in Japan, by the way. It also will reduce the migration and osteoclastogenesis. This is through preventing certain transcription factors that would again lead to more bone loss through the activity of these osteoclasts. And then there's another study which shows enhanced bone strength, which is very interesting. And what we do know is that in women who have osteoporosis, they actually will have increased bone concentrations of spermidine. We've been trying to figure this out because some people say, oh, the presence of high spermidine actually indicates that that spermidine causes osteoporosis. But in fact, what the belief is, and I've spoken with one of our scientific advisors, Professor Katja Simon here at Oxford, she has said, no, that is actually the body trying to inhibit the osteoclast. It's actually the body's way of protecting the bone. It is upregulating spermidine. So it's kind of like with Alzheimer's. These are the ambulances that are coming to the scene of trauma, trying to repair things. And this is a sign that the body is doing a good job. It knows intuitively what it should be doing. It's just that it doesn't have quite enough of the spermidine to get the job done. So one of the things that I always do is tell people as we get older, increase the amount of plant material that you take into your diet, increase the amount of fermented foods as long as you can manage the histamine load from these fermented foods. Try to take in more fermented vegetables, whether it's kimchi or sauerkraut or even things like kefir. If you're doing, if you can't do dairy, then try it with a coconut kefir or a yogurt made from perhaps almond milk. Just get more spermidine into your body that way naturally. And always, if you can, go to your local Asian market and get some natto. That is my number one recommendation.
Can we
But
just
it's
talk
not,
about that for a second with natto?
of course.
Natto is something that also is incredibly high in vitamin K2, which has
Yes.
been shown to being very, very necessary for our bones to get the calcium in, and as well as make sure the calcium gets it out of the soft tissue. But the interesting thing with, and they've done research on places where, in Japan, where it's high natto, that people have, reduced bone loss, reduced fractures, all sorts of positive bone, things for our bones and reduced osteoporosis. So, but it's interesting because I've always thought it's the K2. So maybe it's the combination of the K2 and the
It could
spermidine.
well be the combination, and actually, it's interesting because the primidine GF has naturally occurring vitamin D and K2 as well in it. But with natto, yes, natto is amazing. It is fermented soybeans, and you ferment them on the island of Okinawa. They will actually ferment these soybeans for a year in limestone caves, so that the amount of this bacteria really, it really matures and blossoms. The only problem with that is that it lends a very pungent smell to this dish. And the, I don't want to call it a slime, but it is a kind of, it has a bit of
It's
a
pretty
slimy
awful.
texture.
It's unfortunately, I mean, a lot of people in my community have tried it, and it's most almost none of my patients can tolerate it. If you're not, I think if you're not born in Japan and you're accustomed to it, it's tough. So it's
It's
not,
difficult.
unfortunately, it's not the most delicious, like you're eating
No.
slime. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a little bit slimy, and people say to me, "Oh, it's like Leslie, it's like cobwebs, and I can't get it off of my face. It's so irritating." So yes, there's a very particular smell, mouth feel, and taste, and they're all challenges. But if you can overcome those challenges, perhaps by enrobing it in some rice and some seaweed, or putting in some ginger, it's so good for you and is by far the cheapest way to get this into your diet. And I always say, if you can, go with a food derived molecule, because we as humans have co-evolved with these foods. The body recognizes them, and there may be other things in there that we scientists have not yet identified as being important, right? So yes, it has naturally occurring vitamin K. And as you mentioned, K together with D will drive the calcium away from the arteries and soft tissue into the bones. And that's so important. Um, so yes, if you can tolerate it, please do try to get some of that into your diet.
Yeah, it's really interesting because it's sort of been a thing. I always ask people, okay, some people I know are chefs. Let's come up with some great recipes. And because as you said, it's so healthy. But I'm a person, I teach happiness. So you have to, you have to enjoy your food. That's part of
Yeah,
it. You don't want to be
yeah,
stressed out and just feel, oh,
yeah,
I'm just getting this down. That's not the
yeah,
energy we want to put with our food. So
yeah.
yeah, so it is a challenge, but yes, it's amazing. So
And
continue.
it's one of the reasons why I wanted to actually make a spermidine product available in a more palatable way. And so my mother is from Taiwan, and I've grown up with natto in the fridge. But my stepfather is Caucasian, and whenever my mother would lift the saran wrap up off the edge of the bowl, he would just, that's horrible. It's like a bomb went off, a stink bomb went off in the kitchen. Go away. So I thought, I don't want my mom to stop eating this, given that she's in her 80s. She really needs this. So why not make it available in a non pungent form? And as mentioned earlier, the endosperm of any seed will have high concentrations of spermidine because it's needed for the growth of that plant. And we found that in wheat germ, you can highly concentrate wheat germ. And as long as you remove those very volatile polyunsaturated fatty acids that often go rancid, that bakers hate, and why wheat germ is never in bread, as long as you remove that, you can create a really nice shelf stable product that has high concentrations of spermidine, spermine, and the delightfully named putrescine. These three polyamines work in a virtuous um, recycling loop, and they can turn into each other depending on what the body needs. And they're all in this highly concentrated, defatted wheat germ. But I thought we're missing a trick. If we just take spermidine from food, we're forgetting the fact that the body has this innate wisdom to manufacture it in the gut biome. Let's not forget that those colonies of bacteria that can manufacture it are still there, but we need to feed them. And unfortunately, with the standard American diet, we don't get enough of the fiber we need to feed those colonies that can manufacture it. So we looked at these fructooligosaccharides that do feed it, and we then put those together with this powdered spermidine from wheat germ, and that was our very first product. With the next product, as an autoimmune survivor, I knew so many of my friends, so many other people who would come to us would say, I can't go anywhere near gluten. I'm on the autoimmune paleo protocol. I'm on the FODMAPs diet. I'm on the, no lectin diet that Dr. Gundry has told me about. So we wanted to find high concentrations of spermidine that were not in a lectin. And in this case, we found it in one of the most perfect foods on the planet, which is in chlorella. Again, the Japanese have, they have incorporated chlorella into their daily lifestyle. And there will always be spermidine in every plant that you find. Even your house plants will have spermidine, although I don't suggest you eat them. Every chlorella will have it, but we really wanted to find it with the minimum effective dose of 1 milligram in tablet form. And so we had to test over 100 different strains of chlorella to find one that was very high in spermidine. Interestingly enough, it doesn't have very much iodine. It has almost no iodine, and most chlorella does. But it does come with naturally occurring amounts of vitamin K and vitamin D, which is very helpful. It has a bit of iron in there. So this particular one is not good for those with hemochromatosis, where they collect too much iron in their organs. But for women of reproductive age who are losing a lot of iron with their monthly bleed, or for women who are on the anemic side, this is a really nice solution. So those are some of the places that we found it, and I continue to look for other sources of spermidine, but derived from food sources. And I will just say that although there you can manufacture spermidine synthetically, there it's not never been tested in humans. So I always say go to food first if you can, which we have done. And if something synthetic has never been tested in humans, avoid. You know all about molecular mimics. And sometimes molecular mimics look, like my two hands, they look identical, they match up perfectly, but I cannot put my left hand glove onto my right hand. It's not the same. And of course, the worst molecular mimic that there ever was is thalidomide. So I always caution people, if you prove safety, it's fine. But until proven safe, try to get from food.
And I think that's wonderful that you were able to harness everything you needed from food for your supplement. So, Leslie, tell us, you said 1 milligram was the dose that in the research they found to be effective for so many things. And so, how can we get that 1 milligram in our food? Is that an easy thing to do? Or is that, other than natto, is there other ways that, is it something we can do? Or is it really very difficult to get that amount that's been shown to be effective?
So, unfortunately, it is very difficult to get this kind of standardized amount into our diet. And the reason why is because in the studies where they look at, say, the spermidine content of different vegetables, say shiitake mushrooms, that content will vary from harvest to harvest. And it depends very much on the growing conditions, on sunlight, on soil, on the integrity of the soil. We all know that soil today, due to monocropping and pesticides, does not contain the same nutrition that it once did. So, in order for us to get 1 milligram of spermidine into those tiny 3 capsules, we're actually using over a kilo of wheat in order to get that, of wheat germ, a kilo of wheat germ to get this amount that we can test in the lab and say, hand on heart, there is absolutely a minimum of 1 milligram of spermidine in there. So I think that is the difficulty is that, you may test, say, some green pepper in a lab. And at that moment, in that particular green pepper, it says high spermidine content. But there are a couple of questions. Can you just go into your local grocery store at Kroger and get the exact same green pepper with the same amount? And then how much are you actually absorbing? Whereas we know that with this highly concentrated wheat germ and this highly concentrated chlorella, that it is actually very absorbable in the lumen of the gut, and that's extremely important.
Got it. Okay. So that's very helpful. And is there anything can people overdo it? If they take too much, is there any contraindications? You mentioned the one when people are taking the gluten-free with the iron, but is there anything else that, people listening, if this is interesting to them, should be aware of?
Well, with supplemental spermidine, you wouldn't want to take more than 6 milligrams of food-derived supplemental spermidine. Now, you can get more in your diet. If you get it in your diet from plant material, that's fine. But the FDA has not actually ruled on a daily dose for spermidine. The European Food Safety Authority, EFSA, is the only regulatory body in the world that has ruled on this, and they have set an upper limit of 6 milligrams of food-derived spermidine. So with something like a synthetic, that would be illegal. But with food-derived, they say 6 milligrams max. And with the chlorella product, if you have too much chlorella, what will happen is, unfortunately, your poo will turn green. And that's not that's not wonderful for people. They might get a bit freaked out about that. But it does happen, right? And so you don't want to overdo that. And with the wheat germ derived one, um, there are people who high dose, and there the issue would be, can one manage with the prebiotic fiber? So not everyone can deal well with fructooligosaccharides, even though human breast milk is about, I think it's about 50% fructooligosaccharides. And it's just that with our modern diets, not everybody can deal with it. So I've noticed that people who are on the carnivore diet and some people who have autoimmune conditions find great healing with the carnivore diet. If they try to take these fructooligosaccharides into their diet, they have real trouble, just as they would if they were to take some plant fiber back into their diet.
Okay, but
So,
your one but the one tablet, I mean, or the dose,
yeah.
they usually tolerate that, just no more?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
You definitely tolerate, and you could go up to 6 milligrams per day.
And is the prebiotic fiber also in the gluten-free version?
No, there isn't in the gluten-free version, mostly because it's really been thought of, with the autoimmune patient like me in
Yeah,
mind, and often there is leaky gut, and there are problems with these, with these fibers, these indigestible fibers. They can lead to bloating in some of these folks with, undiagnosed leaky gut, and, so I wanted to make sure that we didn't put anything in there. If people want to add in fiber in their diet, they can do that separately. They can always get a fructooligosaccharide separately. We're using a resistant starch, a resistant maltodextrin. A lot of people say maltodextrin is terrible. That's in the wheat germ product. Um, but once you get past a certain amount of just starch or roughage in there, it becomes then this resistant starch as
right.
opposed to, say sugar.
Well, I think one of the huge benefits is that because leaky gut is very prevalent, it's just so prevalent. Almost, I would say 90% at least of the people who get tested have leaky gut and, with bone health and osteoporosis issues as well as gluten problems. So the fact that this can also help, I love the fact what you said about the zonulin,
Yeah.
that so it's actually helping heal the leaky gut in addition to everything else. So it's such a win-win. So tell us what also is exciting that we've talked about is some other benefits that you've seen in terms of
Yeah.
sarcopenia and our hair, just there's some real, and I just started taking this recent. So I will, I need a little time to see. The only
Good.
thing I noticed was that I seem to be even going to the bathroom more, like, just it was like, "Oh, this is interesting," and I don't really have
Mm.
issues, but it was a positive thing. But so, yeah, so a couple months, I will tell you what's going on with me, but just explain what you've seen, 'cause so many people have had such interesting results with this.
So I'd say that the one that people tell us about the most is hair. So they notice that their hair, they get new hair growth, and it's usually at the hairline, and they'll say, "I've got these new baby hairs," and sometimes it's their hairdresser that will say, "Did you know you've got all this new growth?" And in particular, with those who've had COVID and lost hair there, um, will notice this. Or some people who lose hair as they get older, they notice that it grows back. And it can also grow back into its original hair color. So I'm 57. I've never dyed my hair. I'm 57 and a half. And I take a lot of spermidine in my diet and supplementally. And it has been shown to rescue epithelial stem cells in the hair follicle such that it will move the hair growth cycle from the shedding phase to the growth phase. And it is only in the growth phase when pigment is actually produced. So people have told us that they notice where they have a white hair and it will be white down here, but at the root, it's coming in the original color again. And, this is results may vary, right? This is what they always say. It's very dependent on the individual and what their spermidine levels are to begin with, I would say. But we have had, people in their 70s and their 80s, and a guy who was 91 saying, "I have new hair growth and it's coming in my original dark brown color." So That is the one thing people notice. You'll notice that your nails grow faster and stronger because our spermidine will help with the growth. We have tested specifically for hair and nail growth with the wheat germ product. We know it upregulates keratinocytes and so increases keratin in nail and hair. We haven't replicated that study with the gluten-free product yet, but in principle, it ought to do exactly the same thing. Another thing that people notice is that their skin improves. So the quality of the skin improves. We've had very young people with acne who have taken, say, the gluten-free product, and after 2 to 3 months, they notice that the inflammation goes down. Other individuals with rosacea have noticed that that also goes down as well. And that probably is in line with the idea that spermidine is anti-inflammatory. So that would make sense. The final place where people notice this change is in their sleep. And it's really with wearable sleep tracking devices like the Whoop, the BioStrap, the Aura. And we've even had people take, say, the either product, they take it right before bed on an empty stomach, and then they check their sleep score for that night. And it can be the very first night that they take it, and they notice a spike in their deep sleep. Now, deep sleep is important because it's when the different compartments of the brain shrink and the lymphatic system, where the cerebrospinal fluid travels between the different compartments of the brain, gets active and removes waste. And very important for us women because we have twice the risk of getting Alzheimer's as men. So deep sleep is very, very important. And we've had just far too many people send us pictures of their app saying, look at this big spike in deep sleep. And if I remove the spermidine, look how it plummets. So there's definitely something there. And we know um, that in laboratory studies, we know that spermidine has an impact on what are called the clock genes. And the clock genes talk to something called the suprachiasmatic nucleus inside the brain, and that modulates our circadian rhythm. As we get older, our circadian rhythm becomes dysregulated and we get less and less sleep. And so by impacting the clock genes, and there are 8, and we know that spermidine definitely impacts 2 of those 8, it seems to give us a longer deep sleep cycle and also a shift. We've had people who have documented on Instagram where they have had to, where they have had sort of jet lag. They've had to time shift, or maybe they have to stay up and work from 12 midnight to 3 a.m. And taking the spermidine even at 3 a.m., they're able to get their deep sleep window, which normally only happens at the very beginning of your sleep cycle. And often people miss that deep sleep cycle because they're just going to bed too late.
Wow. So what's your recommendation? It says 2 pills a day.
Yeah,
That's the dose. So do you
correct.
recommend with food in them? So you recommend if anyone has issues with sleep, take it not at dinner, right before bedtime?
I would say right before bedtime. Now, on the bottle, we put take it before 2 p.m. And the reason for that was because it has naturally occurring vitamin D in it. And as you know, vitamin D is only synthesized in the skin when we are in the presence of bright light. And so, talking to various doctors, they all said, well, that could be a circadian signal. Don't take it don't take it, as darkness falls. And that's why we wrote take before 2 p.m. But we have simply had too many case studies of people saying, I just disregarded what you said. I took it right before bed because I didn't want to forget. And I had even better scores than I did if I took it before 2 p.m. So I was talking with Joel Green. I don't know if you know him, but he's written a good book on called The Immunity Code, And he said, "Oh, vitamin D is actually really good before bed." I was like, "I've never heard that before, but very interesting." In our case, it seems to work very well right before bed on an empty stomach, and people seem to get great sleep. It works, I'd say, in about 70% of the cases. It's not every single person, but about 70%.
Okay, is there anything that you don't wanna take it with if you're taking other supplements? Is there anything that it can you should
Well,
separate it from?
um, not that we have seen, certainly not the GF. Um, I can tell you that I take it at night with melatonin, with glutathione,
And you
with,
take both pills at night together,
progesterone.
or you take one in the morning and one in the at one in the
I take them
ah,
both together.
so you can
Yeah.
take both at night before sleeping.
Yeah.
Just try it. Okay, I'm that's what
Yeah.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
do. I'm gonna test this out. That's good.
Experiment. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
as you know, we're so bio-individual and we have
yeah,
to kind of find the sweet spot. I do have clients who say, "Oh, I tried it at night. It didn't work for me. It kept me up." I was like, "Okay, you're different, right?
yeah.
You're special." And they say, "Well, they take it in the morning for energy and it works great." So we do have to kind of play around with it. And I know that everybody wants the quote unquote right answer, but we are so different. We have such beautiful um, bio variability that we just need to play around with it.
Oh, well, this has been so helpful, and thank you. You're giving a discount to our community for anybody that wants to try it. So that will all be in the show notes. And is there anything else that you would like to share with everybody before we end?
Um, Always get it from your food first if you can, right? Supplements are there to be exactly that, to be supplements and nothing more. And, also pay attention to your gut biome. That's a little internal pharmacy that we have. And if you are good to the mitochondria in your gut biome, they will be good back to you. And they will produce not just more spermidine, but they'll produce many other things that we need, like serotonin as well. So those are my final thoughts.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you for all the work and your company does to really help all of us. And it's just so wonderful that you sort of fell into this and then so much good has been produced. So I'm excited to continue with this and I will let you know. And I hope the listeners do as well. Anyone that increases their spermidine, I'm so curious to hear all the good things. So thank you so much for being here. And I look forward to staying in touch.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Margie. Really appreciate it.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Leslie and now have an understanding of spermidine and how this can be helpful for our bones, our overall health, our sleep, our hair, nails, skin, and so much more. As Leslie said, you can get this in your food, but there's also her supplement, and all the links to that will be in the show notes. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.